work as an Uber Eats driver at night to make a little extra cash. Friday and Saturday nights are always the busiest because everyone's either home or with friends and ordering food, so those were usually the nights I would work. I got a request on a Saturday night at 1 a.m. to pick up McDonald's for a guy named Kyle. He lived a few minutes away from my current position, so I punched in the nearest McDonald's, which was like a 2-minute drive away, and picked up his order. It was a small order. I think he only wanted 2 hamburgers. He lived like 5 to 7 minutes away from the McDonald's. I followed the app's directions to the house, and eventually it led me to a short dead-end street that veered off another dead-end street. The house was the last one on this dead-end road. It sat right next to a line of trees that ran alongside a highway that was pretty much dead at this hour. Given how late of an hour it was, I didn't want to ring the bell, so I called this Kyle guy's number. It rang once, then went to voicemail, so I hung up. Then I got a text from him though. He told me to come to the door, and so I did. I got to the big wooden front porch of the house, and soon the front door opened. A bald guy opened the door, only he didn't look very old. He looked to be in his 30s, yet his head was completely bald. Maybe he was sick or just liked that look, so I didn't judge. However, his breath was disgusting, and he seemed to be quite drunk, so that was a little off-putting. The payments were done through the app, so usually there was no need to wait around for money. But this time, this Kyle guy asked me to come put the pizza on his kitchen table while he ran to fetch a tip. I didn't object to free money, so I waited in his kitchen, which by the way was only lit up by a small outlet-sized nightlight, so it was pretty dim in there. The whole kitchen smelled rather disgusting though. I didn't know what it was. Kyle was taking awfully long down in the basement fetching this tip, so I started to wander a bit. I stepped into the living room, which was adjacent to the kitchen. The TV was on in there, which was the only reason I could see anything. However, the stench was even greater in this room. Then I noticed that the back door was slit half open. Maybe he was airing out whatever that putrid odor was. For the hell of it, I walked to the back door, expecting to get a quick breath of fresh air, but the smell only got worse. Then, finally, I stepped outside onto the man's back deck. I heard flies. The sound of a swarm of flies, right by the door. Then, I guess a motion-sensing light saw my movement and turned on, revealing 2 big black garbage bags stuffed with 2 long objects. The smell was unbearable, too. It took me a second to catch on to what I was most likely looking at. Suddenly, waiting around for the tip didn't seem like a good idea anymore. I went back inside and just then I heard Kyle emerge from the basement calling to me, waving a few singles in his hand. He said, "Oh, okay," as he came over to me and handed me the bills. Then he turned to the back door, where the light was still on. Then he looked back at me, with his gummy smile now disappearing. He asked me in a firm voice if I went to his backyard. I told him no, and he just stared at me, not saying anything. I didn't give any fucks anymore. I opened the door and walked myself out, but not without him grabbing my shoulder as I got onto the stoop. I yanked his hand off my shoulder and ran to my car. I saw him run back inside with the front door still open. I turned my car on, but I sat and watched his front door, curious to see if he'd come back out, and he did. He came back out running full speed for my car with a big metal rod in his hand. I drove away from his house, ready to call the police and report him. I called when I got down the block, making sure to leave him no time to dispose of those potentially dead bodies. I waited down the block and saw police cars pull up literally within 2 minutes. I watched the whole thing as I told police where to go. In fact, Kyle, if that's his real name, had already started moving the bags, which did contain dead bodies, to the bushes in his backyard. Everything about this guy was off. For leaving the back door open to reveal dead bodies to a pizza delivery boy, he may have been deranged, but he also wasn't the smartest man around. I deliver food for an Asian eatery in my town. It's the best gig I could get at my age, simply for the tips alone. My friend and I work there together. We're actually the only 2 who are an Asian. My friend usually works the counter and takes phone calls. I usually do deliveries, and that's the way I like it. My friend got off the phone during one night shift we had together and told me I'd be doing a delivery. After the food was prepared, I was handed a brown paper bag and I was off on my way. The address I was given led me to some small dirt driveway off the main road, onto an enclosed property. Don't picture it as some luxurious private property though. It was some old, unkempt excuse of a property. And the house seemed to be closed off given that there wasn't a single light on in there and how high the grass was. I called my friend back at the restaurant and he gave the phone to our boss. Unfortunately, our boss is a stinge, so he yelled at me in his thick Asian accent to knock on the door and don't waste the food. I got out from my car, rubbing against my shins. That's how tall it was. I went up the 3 stairs to the front door and knocked really loud since there didn't seem to be a doorknob. As I expected, after 30 seconds of waiting, there was no answer. So I got back in my car, and first thing I did was start texting my friend back at the restaurant. But when I looked up back to the house, the upstairs lights inside of the house was turned on. So I went back to the door and knocked once again. Only on the first knock, the door pushed open slightly. Someone had opened the door, but there was nobody next to the door. I pushed the door open a little more and called out hello. My voice echoed through the empty house. I was waiting to hear footsteps come to the door. They never did. Obviously, someone had to have opened the door, so if they weren't going to come to the door, I had to assume they wanted me to come in. I stepped into the house as my shoes made the wood floor creak. I called out one more time, and this time someone replied back. I heard the words aquí arriba. Now, I'm not fluent in Spanish by any means, but I knew that aquí meant here, and I knew arriba meant above, so I put 2 and 2 together and figured they said up here. There was a stairway in the middle of the hallway, so I walked over to it and stopped at the bottom step. I looked up the stairs, and all I saw at the top was an arm reached out over the ledge, doing a little stiff come here motion. I used what little Spanish skills I'd gained from middle school and said something like Tango tu comida as I walked up the stairs. As I got about halfway up the stairs, the arm wasn't there anymore. I got to the top looking for whoever was just standing by the ledge over the stairs. Then I noticed through the tiniest amount of light that the person was now inside a bedroom with the lights off. But I didn't see the actual person. Once again, all I saw was the person's arm, doing that same come here motion. It's as if anything above the person's elbow was faded to black in that room. It was such an eerie sight. I knew for certain I wasn't going in that room though. So I said firmly with confidence, "Buddy, I'm not going in there. You come out here with money or I leave." Suddenly, the arm pulled away into the darkness of the room ahead of me, and after a few seconds of standing there in silence, I was hit by a flying object. It happened so fast that it took me a few moments to realize I'd just been hit with a stiff, severed arm. It wasn't some plastic Halloween toy, it was a real arm. I ran down the stairs with the food still in my hand and got back to my car. I didn't even call my friend or my boss. I drove straight to the nearest neighboring house and rang that person's doorbell. When they answered, I told them about what their neighbor had just done to me, and the woman had the most puzzled look on her face. She said nobody's lived in that house for a year. I felt my stomach drop when those words hit me. She said she would call the police after we talked about it for a good 5 minutes. Then I went on my way back to the restaurant with the food. I explained the best I could to my boss, and he let it go. I sometimes wonder how things would have played out if I went into that room, and who or what I would have found. I used to work at Domino's. They close at 3 a.m. on weekends, and being that I was taking an off year during college at the time of the story, my boss took advantage of that and always threw me on the 9 to 3 a.m. shifts. There would always be at least 3 people working that late. 1 to cook the pizzas, 1 to take orders, and 1 to do any needed deliveries. This night the one cooking the pizzas was Jeff, a 28-year-old Italian guy who worked 2 jobs. He was always in a bad mood, so when he told me to deliver something, I did it without complaints. So, being a Saturday night, it wasn't uncommon to get calls for deliveries past 2 a.m. Around 2:30, I was told to deliver 2 pizzas to an address that I still vaguely remember. 27 Crocker Drive, or something close to that. I took my stupid, beat-up 2002 Honda Civic up the road for 5 minutes. The only main road that cuts through our tiny-ass town. I live in the Manchester Township area in Jersey, containing a whole lot of nothing but trees everywhere. My drive there was a dark one. After merging off the main road onto smaller roads with no streetlights, the only light that could be seen for miles were my headlights. I turned off the public road onto a dirt road with a private property sign posted outside. It seemed I had arrived to the house I was delivering to, when suddenly I heard a bang reverberating through my car, followed by a weakened sense of handling of my car, as well as a repeating flopping sound. I knew for certain I'd just got a flat tire. I stopped the car at once and got out to confirm the front right tire was completely flat. I could see through the headlights that the house was walking distance from my car though, so instead of calling my insurance company, it would make more sense to deliver the pizza and also ask that person for help. I got to the deck of the house. It was an average size house, completely enclosed by trees, as were most of the houses around here. The lights were on inside, but all the blinds were shut. I rang the bell, and quickly a normal-looking young man answered the door. Before exchanging the pizzas for money, I told the man about the predicament I just found myself in. A look of concern came over his face as he handed me the pizzas. He came outside to take a look at my car with me. It was a 30-second walk from the house. We got to my car, and he started fixing the tire. He said he could help me, he'd just need his tools from inside. I started questioning what I could have hit on his dirt driveway, and he yelled out to me, "Don't worry about it," as I was walking down his road. I walked a bit further, kind of ignoring him, when I noticed a spike strip in the road. A very small one, but undoubtedly what I hit. I couldn't see any other reason for that to be there, other than him putting it there deliberately. I started thinking over the possibility of so I pretended I didn't see the saying I didn't find anything. He looked at me. Suspicious. But then he turned away and said he was going inside to get some tools. I waited for him to get to his front door before I got back in my car, turned the car on, and threw it in reverse. I was not sticking around there to find out what he was doing. I heard the flat tire wobble on the dirt road as my car slowly rolled in reverse. I made a point of avoiding the spike strip this time. As my car pulled out of the private dirt road onto the concrete road, I took one last look down the man's driveway to make sure he wasn't following me, then I took off. I couldn't drive too fast though and risk of damaging my wheel. I stayed at a steady 10 to 15 miles per hour. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw something behind my car. The man running after my car. I had no choice but to step on it, forcing me to cringe as I could literally feel the damage being done to my wheel. The distance between my car and the man got greater until he was out of sight. After turning back onto the one main road that I'd mentioned earlier, I slowed down the speed a little bit, back to 10 to 15. It was a long ride back, about 20 minutes since I had to drive slow. When I got back, the place would be closing in 10 minutes, but I had to return the Domino's sign that they make us put on our cars when doing deliveries. Jeff was upset with me that I took so long, until I told him the whole story. The woman who was also working the same shift as us listened in with a look of shock on her face the whole time. When time came to close, I should just drive home slow since I live like down the block, and that I should take care of it tomorrow. I sat in my car thinking. Eventually I turned my car on and started my slow drive back to my house. I was following close behind me for a while, so I pulled over in front of some small house to see if they would do the same. The car passed me, but then pulled over on the same side of the street a little further down. I started to panic, knowing it had to be the man who figured that he'd find me at the door I ordered from. So even though I didn't know for certain if it was him, I had to be overly paranoid and call the cops. I had police come to my exact location for fear of being followed. After 5 to 10 minutes of waiting, I my horn to stop him. In reverse so that his windows were lined up with mine. The car in front of me with its lights off, sitting a little further in front of me. But just then, that car zoomed out off, instantly disappearing down the road into the night. The cop put his lights on and sped after him without saying a word. I didn't know if he wanted me to follow him, but I couldn't with my top. I drove home as quick as I could and parked my car in the driveway. I still don't know if that cop caught that driver. Somehow I doubt it, but I like to imagine he did. Either way, I always made sure to watch my back every time I drove home after that night, and I quit that job 2 months later.
Last night, my sleep was cut short by a phone call that came from an unknown number. The ringing woke me up. I scrambled to the phone and looked at the time. It was 3:05 a.m. I looked down at the blindingly bright light of my smartphone. The call was coming from an unknown number. My decision-making wasn't the best in that moment, and I decided to pick up. Hello? Who is this?
Hi, mister. My name is Stacy.
This caught me off guard. The person was a small child, judging by the voice. I sobered up in a second and perked up my ears. Hi, Stacy. Honey, are you okay? Why are you calling me?
He said I can't talk to anyone, or I would be punished.
Her voice sounded shaken up and she was crying. Who told you that? Your father?
No, the man that took me to his house and said it was my new home, and that my parents gave me to him. I haven't seen my dad in a year. He never lets me go out of the basement. He gave me this phone today and said I can play games, but I opened the contacts and your number was the only one there.
It sounded like she had been kidnapped, but I tried to remain calm, trying my best not to frighten her even more. I took out my backup phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher picked up in a second, and I told her just to listen. I held the phone up close and continued to talk to Stacy. Can you tell me your last name and your parents' number?
My last name is Martin. I don't really remember my dad's number, but I do know 3 numbers. 203.
Okay, I'll see what I can do. Just stay on the line with me, okay? I hope the dispatcher was paying close attention and collecting the information, searching the database for a missing child by that name. Stacy's voice suddenly came through again, even more scared than before.
He's coming now. I can hear him.
A loud bang came from the room and Stacy started screaming, and on top of all that I heard this deep voice shouting,
"You little bitch!"
There was a commotion, and then silence. Officers visited my home the following morning and took my statement. They had identified Stacy's parents, and it turns out that she had been missing for a year. After being abducted from her bedroom in the middle of the night, I waited up for the next several nights, praying that she would call me again. But she never did. The one thing that especially worries me is why the abductor had my number, and why I was his only contact. I answered a scam phone call the other day. You know, one of those pretend to be something legitimate like the IRS? I kept a landline as a decoy. I only give my cell phone number to people that I really trust, so that's the one that telemarketers and robocalls usually go for. I had been cleaning up my apartment when my phone rang, and when the caller ID showed an obviously spoofed number, I took a break from my labors to answer it. I figured fucking with a scammer would be a nice distraction from scrubbing the bathroom. The guy, in a refreshing twist, did not sound like an Indian trying to have an American accent, so it was probably genuine.
Hello, this is the IRS. Our records show a discrepancy with your account and you need to settle that payment as soon as possible. I'll need a working credit card number and your social security number.
I could practically see the script this guy was reading from. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that first part. I was grinning in anticipation of the obstacle course I was going to put this guy through. He sighed, like I was being difficult. He hadn't even begun to see me get difficult.
Our records show...
No, your name. I didn't catch it.
Sir, my name is not important. You need to make good on your debt. I have 911 ready on the other line, and you will be arrested for failure to pay.
My, the little fucker was forward, wasn't he? I ramped up my act. Oh my god, whatever could be wrong with my tax return? I've only been blackmailing my employees for sex. That's not considered embezzlement, is it?
Sir, you will be treated as a hostile party during arrest if you do not cooperate.
Oh, please don't take my vast fortune. It's all tied up in gift cards, I wailed. The guy on the phone let out another annoyed sigh.
Sir, you can't treat the IRS like a joke. What year do you think this is?
2017, the year of our Lord, I said as dramatically as I could. His end of the line went quiet.
That's not funny.
Oh what, did your OS forget to roll over during Y2K? Cracked software can do that sometimes. Do me a favor and delete your Windows 32 file, and that should fix things right up.
Sir, it's 1985. I will call the police if you do not cooperate.
That made me pause. What the fuck kind of game was this guy playing? I decided to continue. I hate to break this to you, buddy, but it just turned 2017, about a month ago. I have the celebrity deaths counter to prove it. His end of the line went quiet.
Sir, I must inform you that attempting to deceive a representative of the IRS constitutes a felony charge.
So you're in 1985. I sprawled sideways across my easy chair. Can you find Reagan for me and slap him? The caller was quiet for a few seconds.
Prove to me it's 2017.
Look, I don't have to prove shit to you. You're trying to scam me out of my goddamn money. I could hear him breathing erratically on the other side.
They promised me I could go right back if I worked, they said. I have a 10-year loan for God's sake.
Where are you calling from? A North Korean prison?
No, hell.
He said it so casually, like he was saying, I'm at the office, or I'm just down the block. So you're in hell, I repeated back to him.
I got tricked into coming here a while ago. They said if I worked for them for a bit, they'd send me right back.
He started mumbling away from the receiver. I could catch a few words here and there, mostly profanities. So what, you're making phone calls in the middle of the inferno?
Actually, it's a lot like an office. Everything's gray, even the computer screen. I have to squint really bad to read anything. At first I was glad, but, you know, I kind of feel like Hellfire would be an improvement at this point. I never see anyone or talk to anyone. I just get the numbers and dial out.
He was babbling, and just sounded glad to hold a conversation with someone. It felt genuine. But this was rapidly becoming very creepy. So hell wants you to scam people out of their money? I got up and started pacing. Did Satan declare bankruptcy?
Nope, it's to make them desperate. People with no money tend to do things that get them into hell, like the guy before me. Someone stiffed him on his GI Bill. I had to agree to fulfill his remaining time. I said yes, and well, here I am.
The amount of detail was unnerving. He didn't stop or stumble through the whole speech.
It's not too bad. I mean, I don't get a whole lot of love from the other end of the phone, but everything's just so gray, you know? I don't know how long I've been here, but the boredom just makes everything feel longer. I haven't eaten or gone to the bathroom since I got here. Haven't needed to. That's what made me think it hadn't been that long. But now that you mention it...
I was out of witty retorts at this point. What the fuck was this guy's deal? Most scammers would just hang up the second they had been found out. Why is he trying to sell me this story?
They told me it wouldn't be that long. Time would fly by, they said. I'd go right back. They wouldn't lie about that, would they?
Yeah, hell is renowned for being truthful.
But I haven't even done anything. They can't keep me here. I'm doing them a favor by working here. They'll owe me.
Yeah? Well, it doesn't sound like it. The guy just rambled on like he hadn't even heard me.
God, I should have gotten it in writing. I don't know how much time I have left on my contract. Unless you could take over my remaining time, couldn't you? You've got nothing going on. You're answering the phone in the middle of a Saturday. You could help me out.
I slammed the phone down so fast, you could swear my arm was spring-loaded. Then I pulled out the cord. I'm probably going to disconnect my landline. Sure, it means I'll have to be much more careful with my personal number, but at least you can install blocking apps on cell phones. I don't know what's more disturbing. The fact that the guy would inflate his lie to such an extreme, or the possibility that it wasn't a lie. Two years ago, my dad passed away from a stroke. The final image of him burned into my mind is his slumped body in front of his office computer, head tilted back, lips blue, skin bloated and purpling, dead. No one ever went into specifics on who found him. I didn't really care. When someone close to you dies, there's this period of time where life suddenly stops and begins spinning out of control all at once. As soon as the news broke, there was a sea of phone calls, text messages, and emails. Most of them went unanswered as I tended to my dad's personal matters. My mother was incapacitated. She sat, eyes fixed, staring at the wall most days. The doctors prescribed her multiple antidepressants and tranquilizers to help her sleep and stay calm. But when you hit that level of depression and anguish, nothing really helps. The loss destroyed her. She never recovered. As I began collecting some of my father's belongings from his office, I got handed a box that contained his cell phone. While handling my own grief, I sat in the parking lot of his work and scrolled through some of the unanswered voicemails he had never been able to receive. Most of them were from my mother. She would hear his voice on the recording. Other times she would have a conversation. There were unopened messages, mostly from me the day he died. I held the phone tightly in my hand, sobbing, struggling to breathe through my tears. His background screen was from Christmas the year before. Him, my mother, and I were wearing the tackiest Christmas sweaters, and we were all laughing. While I had my moment, my dad's phone began to ring. The number came through listed as unknown. I paused for a moment, but I decided to answer in the event that it was something regarding a bill collector. Hello? There was a muffled static on the other end. I paused, thinking that I had lost service. Right before I was going to end the call, a voice finally came through. Hey. Hi? I cautiously asked. It's okay. I'm here now. The words came through crisp and clear, but I couldn't shake this unnerving feeling that creeped up on me. Who is this? I looked at the phone screen again to assure myself that it was an unknown number. I don't know if I know you, I'm sorry. You know me, or you've at least heard of me. My heartbeat thudded hard against my chest. I'm sorry. What? I shook my head, confused and annoyed. Just know everything is going to be okay. Who is this? I repeated, my own voice strengthening. I know all about your father. You. I tried to keep myself calm, but my temper flared. It felt like a prank, and I was losing my patience. Doesn't matter who I am? Yes, I spat angrily, nervously looking through my window to make sure that no one was watching me. My paranoia was gripping at me from all sides. The words coming through the phone felt invasive, like they were ringing in my head. I am known by many names, most commonly the devil, Satan, Lucifer, the Prince of Darkness. I stopped. Everything stopped. My jaw flopped open. Silence came from the other end, and I expected it to then be handled as a cruel joke. Angry tears streamed into my eyes. Are you still there? Why would you do this? This isn't funny. If you call again, I'm calling the cops. I was about to hang up, but something stopped me. I had a feeling deep in my bones, at my core. I couldn't deny that I was curious to know more about this person. I'm telling you the truth. I know that you're mourning, but it's important that we speak. Why? I want to tell you everything. What do you mean? Your father and I go way back. I've known him since he was a boy. He was nice. He helped me when I needed him the most. We were good friends. My heart was strumming against my ribs at this point. My hair was stuck to my forehead in a thick sweat. The inside of my car suddenly felt like an inferno. I dared not open the window though, because I was afraid someone would hear this bizarre conversation. Why would my father be friends with the devil? Why would the devil be friends with a human? I said, I better run for my life. Supposed to be mean. I better run for my life. What I was saying made me want to laugh. Why do you seem so nice? I'm no angel. I shook my head in disbelief. And neither was was your father. The voice's tone shifted immediately, and I felt a chill. On my back ran cold, and I shuddered. What do you mean? Your father helped me. He helped me to survive for years. He was my right-hand man. In return, I gave him whatever he wanted. Jobs, promotions, life, children. The air ran thick. I sucked in a quick breath to make sure my lungs still worked, but I couldn't speak. He did things, unspeakable things, all for me. You're sick. You're a sick person. I regained control of my breathing and settled in for an angry tirade. You have no right to call someone and... You are going to lose everything, and when you do, I will call you again in 2 years' time to ask you what I asked your father. What? Your mother will die from a poisoned body. Your child will perish within the womb. Your wife will lay with another man. All lies within the current of destiny. I ended the call and threw my dad's phone across the front seat of my car. I felt lightheaded and dizzy. After a moment, I drove off, and I never spoke of the phone call to anyone. It always stayed with me, though. I never forgot the conversation, no matter how much I tried. When my mom was diagnosed with cancer last year, I still denied it. When my wife had a miscarriage and left me for another man, I denied it. My mother passed away on Christmas Eve. This morning, I awoke to my father's phone ringing from inside the box. It was stored in my closet, under piles of clothes and artifacts. Even though the battery is long since dead, it kept ringing. An unknown number is calling, and I think I'm going to answer it. Clothes and artifacts. Even though the battery is long since dead, it kept ringing. An unknown number is calling, and I think I'm going to answer it.
On Udemy, you can learn to draw, design, code, play music, take beautiful photos, run a...
The following stories are based on real events and were obtained from interviews conducted by Unit 522 and Tim Sonsky. Some names and identifying details have been changed to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. These stories will contain disturbing content. Viewer discretion is advised. This isn't a traditional creepy story where something unexplainable or horrible happened to me, but rather, what almost happened to me. What I almost became. Back in the early 1990s, I was in my late teens, and without question what could be described as a bad seed. My friends and I were just simply horrible people. We would throw rocks at stray cats and passing cars, bully younger kids and steal bicycles to take them on joyrides, where most of the time we would just leave them in the gully in the woods when we got bored with them. My parents tried to discipline me, but it never really stuck, and most of the time, they found it easier just to have me out of the house. I was an appalling kid, really. I cursed at my parents and teachers, talked back to the cops, and never used to feel sorry for anyone unless it was me. One night, my friend and I were smoking cigarettes on his back porch, and when his dad went to bed, my friend darted into the garage and returned with an old-fashioned handgun. I picked it up with both hands and started pointing it every which way, without a care in the world. He told me his dad had bought it a week ago off the street, and when he confirmed that it was loaded, the very first thing that entered my mind was, "Hey, we should go rob someone." I hid the gun in my waistband and walked down the street with my friend to the end of the cul-de-sac where we knew an old woman lived alone. We had no idea what exactly we wanted to rob from her. We just knew that she would be an easy target. We snuck around the back of the house and walked up onto her back porch, and I was able to force the locked door open just by putting my weight against it and jiggling the knob hard back and forth. As soon as the door was open, and the domestic old person smell from inside the house wafted over us, my friend lost his nerve and bolted away. He literally just said, "I changed my mind," and took off running. I walked right into the house without him, determined not just to take something, but I wanted to scare the woman as well. I walked through the kitchen and into the living room, where the old woman was sleeping on the couch. The TV was on, and the volume was turned down. I pointed my gun at her face. But after a moment, when she didn't open her eyes, I felt disappointed, and I walked around behind the couch. I held the barrel of the gun less than an inch away from her head, and in that moment, from the back of my mind, I kept hearing a voice whispering to me, "You can kill her. Do it." Having a weapon in my hand gave me an incredible feeling of power. I didn't have any intention of actually hurting the woman, but now that I was here, it seemed like the obvious thing to do. Without pausing to think, my fingers squeezed the trigger, but nothing happened. The safety was on, and the trigger was locked. Suddenly, the weight of what I nearly did hit me like a ton of bricks. I started shaking, and immediately lowered the gun. I power walked out of the living room, across the kitchen, into the back door. When I reached it, I paused, turned around, and saw the woman's eyes were open. She was looking right at me. There were tears in her eyes, and a look of terror on her face. Her fear immediately made me start tearing up. I ran back home, gave the gun to my parents, and confessed that I had nearly done something really bad. They called the police, and I confessed to having broken into an old woman's house with a gun. I didn't tell them about attempting to pull the trigger. I didn't tell them about my friend or where I got the gun either. I had to spend some time in juvenile hall for breaking and entering. But honestly, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. I'll never forget that night. I was on the path to destruction, and I very nearly crossed a line that would have ruined my life forever. It makes me sick, knowing exactly how close I came. I've never touched a gun since, and fortunately I managed to turn my life around. Please use this as a cautionary tale. All it takes is a thought, a wrong moment, and you could destroy your future. Smarter than I was. Back in the late 90s, I used to have a serious drug problem. I was living in Las Vegas at the time, and after snorting my entire stash of coke, I would party, pass out, take some cars, them, spend some money on food, and the rest would go to my dealer, and then I would snort again and repeat the entire process. One night in July, I broke into a panel van without windows. It was parked alone outside of a rat-infested motel. My gut told me that I should check the back before I drove away, but my mind was on my next fix, and I just floored it as soon as I got the engine started. I drove about an hour away into an isolated area of the desert, where I would meet my contact, who would check out the car, pay me in cash, and then drop me off at the nearest street corner. Once I put the van in park, I decided to check out the back. I figured there might be some tools or something back there that I could pawn for more cash. The back of the van was padlocked shut, which should have been my first clue, because when I smashed it open with my crowbar, I heard a high-pitched wailing from inside. I turned on my flashlight, and my stomach dropped. 4 Hispanic children, 2 boys and 2 girls,